this is kind of going to work if you haven't joined us for the previous office hours is we've got a bundle of questions already kind of set up. These have all come in from social. We asked this question of kind of like what difficulties do you have with process and communication, or what would you love to learn more about? So we asked that on social and we got a lot of really great answers. There's also a lot of questions that either we see really frequently come up in our customer sessions, or when we're dealing or talking with folks just about design and communication and all of that. So we've got a few questions to start us out. Just as your brains are thinking of any questions you might have, start throwing those in the Q&A. And let's get us started with a question for Mal. So this one is on setting up a template file. So I know that I really love starting off with template files so that I don't have to start off with just like a blank screen. I know kind of like where things are supposed to be set up. I've always found too that it's really helpful, like for when I work with different developers or when they're working with different designers, that they don't have to relearn how a file is set up every time. But I would love to hear from you on just suggestions of how to set up that template file and any kind of like tips and tricks on what you would do there.
Of course. Yeah. First, though, I just wanted to shout out Richard in the chat. I think the question just went to hosts and panelists, but it was if advocates eat avocado toast. And yes, we eat lots of avocado toast. You should see us at offsites. Like we order multiple for the table. But without further ado, let me get into some of file template. Can you see my screen? Everything good?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So yes. Well, first, there's no right or wrong way to do anything we're going to show today. I think that's just really important to understand. But there are definitely some suggestions we can make. So I jumped into a new file here just to show a little bit of kind of what you might see in a file. In the left side, you're going to have your layers, and you're also going to have your pages here. Sometimes this is going to be a little bit hidden, but you're always able to open this back up in this drop-down section here. It might also be in your assets panel, which is where you're going to find your libraries, but you can tab over. First and foremost, I think it's really important to think about your file cover. So this is, if you're not familiar, this will show up in your file browser when you're going to look for different files. And it's also going to show up in your teams and projects. So it's really helpful to have that at a glance, and then include any information on here you would like. There's also hundreds of files in the community where you can jam on these. You can duplicate and make them your own. And then from here, we like to use pages or to just separate our different work streams or our different parts of a project. So as you can see, I have a welcome page here. This I actually took from Femke's community file, but it's just one example of how you can kind of introduce somebody to this project you're working on if it's a more formal one. I really think this is just a really great way to level set if you are sending this link out to other collaborators that want to come into the project, but they don't have as much context. This is a great place to include any additional documentation, some information on timelines, and some guiding principles for the project so they can get caught up to speed, especially since we work in such an async environment these days. I think this is really awesome. And then also sometimes we don't have like specific dividers. So what I will do is I'll just create another blank page and use some sort of like dotting or dashing to separate. But you can also use emojis and indents within your page names to kind of create that hierarchy as well. Yeah, and I think emojis are just like a nice additional touch to anything, whether it's commenting, whether it's putting titles to your pages. It helps kind of differentiate the different things in a long list, because these page lists can get pretty long here. And then also, like somebody mentioned, you can totally add sections within these pages as well. So that's going to be another additional thing that you'll want to consider adding to your files. It's pretty easy to just add a section. You can hit Shift S on your keyboard, or it's under the frame tool if you're looking in the top toolbar. And then here you'll be able to, rename your section and group related content. Sometimes we'll see folks will actually gather together resources such as this, such as like a flow description where you have some additional goals here, relevant links, and then teams working on this. So you could have additional things like this built into your template so you can just get started right away and not have to even think about that. I actually took this whole template from the community as well. So once again, shout out to the community and go check out all we have available so you're not spending time recreating things. But just really helpful. You can come in here and even switch, this status here to on hold and just additional documentation for your files. But yeah, and once you have a good file template that you really like, what you can do is you can just name it something like duplicate me. So folks know that it's something that they should duplicate and edit on their own in their drafts or in their projects. And you can also pin it to your files as well, and then duplicate that so you know exactly what is the template you're working off of. But those are some starting tips. I'd love to see if anybody else has other ideas.
Yeah, I'll just mention a couple of things too. Richard, in the chat there, you had a great point just around like with those sections, and we covered this quite a bit in the last AMA too as well. Like you can do a lot with those statuses. Sorry, sections have a lot of different use cases. We covered some prototyping use cases in the last section. In dev mode, you can set that ready for dev behavior, which will surface those screens ahead of others. But we have certainly heard the feedback around having more statuses, right? If you could have things that you could even customize for your own organization or something like that, and just really great feedback. And the team is definitely listening. I think the same also goes for those pages that you have to make that are just a bunch of dashes because you're trying to create separators between the two. Like we obviously struggle with that same thing too as well, and have heard the feedback. So yeah, thanks y'all for that.
Awesome. Cool. I have a next question that's gonna kind of pivot from this over to Akbar of, as a developer, kind of what are you looking to see? I think setting up that template is really helpful to make sure that like all the developers kind of are used to seeing the same thing in that template. But what else do you want to see to make a really successful handoff? Like what is really going to be helpful that you're looking for as a developer?
And I'm just going to take over the screen real quick. And so for me, it's really a lot about trying to understand, like, before you even get started, just having that conversation with your designer, because this is going to change depending on the type of team you're in, what you're working on, etc. A few of the common dev pain points that we've heard are like showing edge cases, not just a happy path. And that's like more of a communication problem than anything else, right? Being able to understand what a developer needs and what they're trying to do. Like at the end of the day, the developer is trying to find what they need to work on, have it not change while they're working on it, and then get an indication of like something that's locked. They want to be able to get in and get out of Figma as quickly as possible. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that just through having that conversation. But then there's also some ways that you can do that through dev mode. And so I'm going to jump into this demo file where I'm going to talk about some of the things that you can do in dev mode to make sure that that communication is happening. And one of them is this example is based on having like a design system, having that communication that you're going to be using different variable tokens. And so as I'm jumping into this file, this frame is ready for dev. I can share this dev link and pass that over to my developer, and they're immediately going to be logged in to this frame. I can jump in, take a look at what's happening over here. If I look through the layers, I can see that there's a header component being used. If I look into it, I can see that component. If I jump over here, I can see that there's the dialog component. This component doesn't exist yet. So I see that there's a Jira ticket that if I click into it, I'll go ahead and see that this ticket is being worked on. I see who's it's assigned to, and that's one step of the communication that I wouldn't have to do just because now I see the ticket here. I know that it's being worked on. I can reach out to this person, ask them about that component. But if there's a component that already exists in this, I can go ahead and inspect it. I see this component exists. There's some documentation here. There's even like a basic snippet in the documentation link. But I can look down here and there's some dev resources attached. And over here, I see that there's a GitHub file linked here. And what that tells me is that this component already exists in our component library. I can see what the code looks like. I can go ahead and start using it right away. If you have, we have an example here where I can use a custom plugin, and I'm going to go ahead and open this in the component inspector. Okay, here we go. And in the component inspector, we have some custom work here that's taking these properties, showing me a type definition, taking the properties that I see on this component and ignoring the ones that I don't need, such as the state with that star asterisk to designate it. And I can see that this instance code is more relevant to me than something like maybe the basic code gen would do, which is just CSS. This is something that's built in React or built in Angular. I can take a look at this. I can see a few different other ways to show this. I can just see the JSON for this component. That's going to take a second to load and probably a little longer than I would like.
Akbar, when you were how did that GitHub link to that GitHub component work? How did you create that link there?
Yeah, so this is something that either a developer can do or the designer who has access to the component links. The dev resources are something that can be added by both designers or developers in dev mode. And so if I click into this, I can go to the actual component. These links are on the component and not on the instance. And so that means it'll show up on every single instance. But if I go to this component, if I click on this, it'll take me to where the component exists. I can see some annotations on this button that show me what the different states are. And if I scroll down here, I can see these dev resources. If I go on the component itself, those are on the variants. If I go on the component itself, I see the GitHub link here. And you can see down here that this is a main component, so any links that you add will show up on all instances. And I can go ahead and add just any other link. For this one, I'm just going to do example.com. And it'll load that link. It'll auto-generate the title, but I can always go ahead and edit it, put my own label, change the link to whatever it needs to be. And this is one way that you can streamline some of that communication that goes back and forth.
That's cool. So in that example there, what you're doing is you're linking to that exact page in your code repository of sort of like, oh yeah, this links directly to the button.
Exactly. So like if you have a component library that's built up, you can link to the exact place in the code repo that it exists. And then not only do I know that this component exists, I know where to find it. I can even see the implementation details if that's something that I cared about. If I had something a bit more fleshed out and like documentations about the design system, I can even see like a more fully fleshed out resource where I can look at code snippets, etc. And you can always take that even further and customize it using our CodeGen API or any of the other APIs. This is just showing the component properties in the JSON schema that is designated by the component inspector. But you can see all those properties. You can see what's coming in. And this is a behind the scenes look of how the component inspector is working.
Awesome.
That about covers a lot of the things that I was thinking about in terms of working with dev mode. One other thing that I haven't covered yet is that when you're looking at screens, if you aligned on using design tokens, make sure that you align on language, make sure that you align on what those colors are, and make sure that on the design side you're using those tokens, because when you're using them, then they automatically surface if I'm looking at a selection. So if you look at these colors over here, I see the color BG brand, I see what the value underneath is. But the nice thing about this too is like if I use the regular code gen, if I go to CSS, I can see that the code that's generated here is using those variables and those tokens that already exist in the system. And as long as we're using the same language, that means what you think of as color BG brand will always be color BG brand on the other side. So we have some resources. We have some resources on how you can set this up for your own team, either using plugins or using the REST API. And that's something that I can share in the chat in a little bit.
Awesome. And Akbar, a question came in too. I don't know if you answered this one or I missed it, but what do you use as your source of truth? Do you use Figma just going into there, or do you use Storybook?
So in my case, I usually use Figma. I've heard of different teams doing different things, right? Again, the thing that I want to stress the most is this is not going to be a one size fits all solution. It's going to be dependent on your team's needs and what you're looking for. There's pros and cons for both situations. So like I've spoken to teams that want to have Figma as their source of truth because they want design to have control over what colors are being set, what tokens are supposed to be set to. And I've had other teams that don't want to be dependent on a single tool, and so they want to use a code base as a source of truth. And that way they can go ahead and import the tokens into Figma and import them to wherever they need it based on what tools they're using and what workflows they're using.
Awesome. That's super helpful. Yeah, definitely I love the emphasis on like it's different for each team. I wish there was, I feel like our often answer is it depends, but it really, really truly does because there's so many different ways that teams work. So I think overall, like my goal, if you take nothing away from today, it's definitely that there needs to be communication. Like I don't think Figma will ever replace just communicating with your teams to figuring out like, okay, let's talk about what's going to work best for us. Awesome.
Exactly. I mean, I think I can speak for all of us in saying that like we wanna make sure that we're facilitating that conversation and we want to be a part of that conversation, but we don't want to replace them. Right.
Definitely.
That conversation is really crucial for being able to make great products.
Amazing. Awesome. Cool. I'm gonna pop over to Anthony now. There was a question that came in the chat about just kind of documentation, and Akbar's done this amazingly. But I would love if you could show us from a design perspective, how do you add in that documentation with the components? Akbar showed us how it comes up, but I would love to see how would you add in that documentation and then any other ways of documentation that you might do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, there's a lot of different levels of documentation. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Great, cool. I think traditionally people have thought about documentation as this tome that lives elsewhere, right? Where maybe you have this Rosetta Stone where your different languages are coming to, you've got examples of your components, you've got examples of how that code gets represented as well. And those are still really valuable. But I think one of the things that Figma really helps to provide is documentation at the point of need. So there's different like altitudes of documentation, and you can really decide what's the most crucial information for someone at a particular point in time. Like, are they referencing this at a different time when there's a lot of content you want them to read, or maybe it's part of your design system that has nothing to do with the components itself. So you want to talk about what your brand voice sounds like, or what your motion guidelines are, or things like that. But for a lot of things around components, I do think it's really valuable to take advantage of component descriptions and some of the things that we can do within Figma. So if I have my designs like this, I'm a designer who is using pre-existing components that came from a design system, whether that came from my if I have the luxury of working with a design systems team where they're actually building components as well, or perhaps I'm on a small team and I'm both the designer of the design system and the actual designer. One really valuable thing is that when you go to use components, we're able to provide additional information about how that component is used and the ways that it should be utilized, right? So this could be everything around like, tell me more about the component for information that's valuable for the designers or information that's valuable for developers. This shows up both in the editor mode as designers are editing, as well as in dev mode too. So if I do switch over to dev mode, I'll get those same information, right? That same description content. There's a bit more in dev mode when it comes to the developer side of things, but you're going to have that information in both places. So I'm switching back to, I'm just using Shift D, by the way, to quickly switch between dev mode and editor mode. And here you kind of have an open space, right? Let's go into how I would actually create one of these descriptions really quickly. So here I'm working with an instance of the component, right? If I'm going to go over to the main components that I have over here to sort of set up as an example piece. And when you're creating a component at a simple level, let me start more simply, right? If we've got just a basic component, I'm going to go ahead and just create a rectangle for this really quickly. And I've got my nice main component here. You'll see this little slider is next to the name of the component, and you'll have a component configuration. So this is a space where you can add a bunch of that additional information, right? So you can add descriptions about your component. You have full rich text editing here too, which is nice. So if you want to do lists and things like that, links out to other areas, even code snippets you could put into the description. Now, keep in mind, some of those dev mode features may supersede that depending on what your needs are. So you may not need to do it here, and it might make more sense to do it on the dev mode side. But you have that capability here if you need to add it too as well. On top of that, you can also add additional documentation links here too, right? Now you might be saying, okay, if we've got dev resources on the dev mode side, we've got documentation links on this side, when and where might I use one or the other? I would say like the dev mode resources are probably authored and maintained and probably most valuable from the developer's perspective. Links to documentation here might alternatively link out to some of those more higher level pieces if you have, say, a component library or a public place where you want to share more information. But yeah, that's how you can add all this information in here. We're big fans of emoji conventions too, as well, right? Emojis are really powerful when you think about it. You can share a lot of information in a very small amount of space. And so things like targeting different audiences that way can also be valuable. So if I wanted to come in and say, oh yeah, I'm going to use a pencil tool for, I want to talk to my writers now. So I'm going to talk to my content teams about like, what are the, the labels are always present in perfect tense or something like that, right? Like you want to talk about the tone of voice or the type of language that you're using. And then maybe if I want to talk to my designers, I'm going to use something else like a paint bucket or something like that. It feels maybe a little old fashioned, but it's actually a really powerful technique to talk to different audiences. I'm doing this on a simple component here. The same thing is true for component sets, right? So if I have a component set of all of my different components at their different states and their different variants in that sense, I can still put that description on the main component set. I can also add a secondary description to the current variant. So if you have additional information that you want to share, you can do that on the variants. You'll see both the main component documentation and the variant as well. So really helpful technique to just sort of add some quick documentation to your components themselves. You can take this a step further with your design system and actually start to just articulate more about your components in context, right? So if your design system has this, there's nothing stopping you from just going and adding a bunch of text to the side that could be relevant information for someone about those components or additional annotations for that stuff, right? Anytime they right click and say, go to main component, they'll be taken to that place with more information. We've got search within the files now, so you can quickly find that documentation too if you need to. And again, this is kind of that blended mode between knowledge at the point of need and having this sort of external indexed resource. As I mentioned, those are still valuable, right? So if you are using tools like Zero Height or Supernova, I think there's a few others, big ones out there too as well. Maybe you've rolled your own custom one as well. Those are valuable because you may need to publicly share your design system more, right? And so they still play an important role depending on how you want to utilize that documentation. Back to it depends, but those are some hopefully helpful use cases.
And Richard just asked an excellent question, which is probably my favorite part about the component descriptions. If you use the keyword in the descriptions, are those searchable in the assets? They are. And I think what's my favorite thing is like, I always like to use like the heart example. Some people would put it like file it under like, love, favorite. There's a lot of different words. And if you're not searching for the right one, you're not going to find it. But if you put those words in the description and somebody searches for those, so putting all the synonyms, then it'll show up. So Anthony's showing us right now, he's just searching for something he added in there. And these components showed up right there, which is really awesome. I think that's the most, for me, it's the most powerful part about it. Yeah.
Right.
So
I'll add some, like right now I'm kind of doing like a tag list, right? And all we're doing is the information basically, the heuristics for the assets panel are going to go off of the name of the component, prioritized, and then it'll start looking through description information. So if you have other lenses through which you want to view those components, right? Like maybe it's not about the product, but maybe it's about the context. Like instead of caring about, oh, this is from this particular product line, what I really care about is I need to see all the mobile components first, or I need to see all of the, that might be high level where you've separated them into separate libraries. But if they're in the same library, you can still do this kind of stuff. So if I need to search for all of my kitten components, I can now go ahead and do that. And all of those are going to show up for me automatically. So that's a great way to like kind of utilize it as a metadata system in that sense.
Amazing. Cool. I'm going to go over to Mal next. Keeping in line with kind of like documentation, comments. Comments, I feel like are amazing because you don't need an editor seat to do it. Like the descriptions, you're going to need an editor seat to edit that description, but comments, anybody can add those. So it's huge for collaboration. But and this was a top social question we got, how do you keep track of those? Because there can become a lot of comments that you can open a file and there's like 85 comments and you're like, this is overwhelming. Never mind. I'm going to leave. So one of the questions is, how do you keep track of all the comments, and any other suggestions around like maybe some things aren't for comments? Take us through that.
Yeah. So first, before I get jumped into comments, I just want to point out that we have like so many resources also for like annotating or documentation in the community as well. So I pulled in this example from, I think this is Mixpanel's annotation kit, but it's just really awesome. They provide you with so many components here that you can easily annotate on the canvas. This also ties into comments as well. Like Lauren said, not everything is suitable for a comment. So maybe you want to leave something more permanent or more descriptive on the canvas. This could be a great way. You can duplicate this and publish it to your files and have all of these, different ways of documenting or commenting. You can use sticky notes, you can use lines and measurements. Really awesome. There's also another one from Deliveroo that I think is really awesome as well. A little bit smaller, but really helpful for notes and different call outs and such. And you can see they have an example of what this might look like in a file as well. Really awesome plugin that I want to just quickly shout out to. So if I wanted to, I could come up and, click on this right here, anything I want to document. And what I can do is if I want to add specific specs, so that's like getting really detailed, I can run this 8shape specs plugin. I can choose exactly, what I'm looking to put on the canvas here to communicate. And right now I'm just going to run all of this and see what happens. And it really generates really fast, all this information on widths, background colors, specific details. If you have styles used, it's going to show that here. A lot of this is going to be available in dev mode as well. But if you're looking to kind of have this visually represented in this way, I think it's awesome as well. We just want to shout that out. But let's jump into comments real quick. Lauren is so right. I get very overwhelmed with comments. So I wanted to quickly show just a few different tips for how to navigate them. So I jumped into this file and you see I have a lot of blue bubbles, mostly from Lauren. She decided she wanted to chat with me a lot today, apparently. And from here, what you can do is you can just open your comments page here, but it's still like, okay, I have a lot. I don't even know what to look at. What you can do is you can always sort and filter these. So you can sort by date, by unread. You can, if you have resolved comments in the file, you can open that up and it's going to show those as well. But what you can also do is only show your threads, right? And then I can also only show things on the current page. So I can navigate through these here. So really, really quick ways to just get those comments down, because if I go to different pages, you'll see I have a bunch of comments. I even have one from Hugo on this page. So really just want to pay attention to what I'm needing to focus on. And if I even want, I can hide these comments too. And here you'll be able to add a notification for, you'll be able to better set the preferences for your notifications. So if you have Slack or Teams or just have notifications into your email, you can really tailor those exactly to what you want to be notified for. Because if you have like those integrations, it's going to ping you for every single comment. And if you're using comments a lot for communication, this can be a lot. So you always have the option to tidy those up a bit. But going into actual comments, a few quick tips here. So I just wanted to shout out this little bit update that we just launched. You can add photos and GIFs or GIFs, however you want to say it, into comments now. And I just wanted to show this because I think it's going to be really powerful for how we really focus on async communication within comments now. Been wanting this for a long time. And just here's a quick example of how you can include this in a common thread. And, maybe once I'm done with this, I can resolve it and we're good. And now I've accomplished that. I think here, Lauren also included just this example to show how you can even add a little bit of more visuals to your comments as well. And then if I always open a comment, I can mark it as unread. I can copy the link to be very specific at what I'm referring to when I'm working with other people. So that's helpful. And to just round off a bit, I just want to give a quick tip of, let me find where in the file, of just comment suggestions in general. And this is more about like feedback structures. I think this comes from HubSpot. So I stole this from them, but I wanted to give them credit and just show you how you can create some more structure for your team in ways of giving helpful feedback. And this you can do with, like Anthony was saying, with emojis. They can be really helpful for signaling and also just letting you know what to pay attention to, what to prioritize. So this is their actual feedback and commenting tag system they have, all the way from FYI, like, oh, just something that I want to, put on your radar, all the way to plea, which is like, we need to pay attention to this. Like, this is really critical. So this, if you have this structure in your team, everybody's aware of it, you're using these emojis or these different hashtags in your comments, it's going to be helpful for you to prioritize when you jump into a file and you have a bunch of comments to go through. And you could do this with stickies. You could do this in any way that makes sense for you. But I hope that gives you an idea of how to better, prioritize and give, feedback via comments to each other.
Awesome. I love the little big update. I didn't even realize it until this week, how awesome that was. I threw in, that was it looked kind of like a video that I threw in there, but that was actually just a GIF that I threw in there. So I think it supports images and GIFs. So like, I feel like even if you had something that you wanted to show somebody, like, how do you do this? Like, hey, Mal, how do I add like auto layout to here? Like, you could do a little GIF of that and throw it in the comment, which is amazing. Cool. I love it. I think there was a question that came in, and this was also a top social question about keeping track of changes and versions and who's made them. And there was even a question that came in via the social that somebody was like, I wish I just had like a time machine where I could see like what people have done in here. And it really made me think of compare changes. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Akbar, to talk to us about what compare changes are. How does that work? And I think too, this one for me is one of those ones that it's in dev mode. But I think there are so many things in dev mode that are not just for developers. Like Akbar's going to show us how amazing it is and how really helpful it is for our developers, but for designers too. Like designers that are there, if there's multiple designers in a file together and they want to see who's done what or what's happened since they were last there, it's a super powerful for designers as well. So over to you, Akbar, to talk to us about compare changes.
Oh, you're on mute.
Of course.
Every time.
Can everybody see the screen share?
Yep. All good.
Cool. So yeah, compare changes is a pretty great feature. It allows you, I saw a question even in the comments about keeping track of changes when somebody's made changes. And this is one of the ways that you can do that. We've recently made some improvements as well. So compare changes works at the top level frame. I can see that this frame is ready for development. I can see that over here that it was edited 2 months ago. So I want to see what's been changed. If I go to compare changes, I get this window that shows me the history of it. And this is the most recent change. And this over here is when it initially got started. And I can see side by side what's different. It's a little hard to see here. I'm going to zoom in, but it's this button difference. And you can see, you can go into the layers and see what's happening. And I can even see like what that change would look like in a code snippets or what that looks like in properties. Over here, I can see that the variables change for the top right corner radius and the bottom left corner radius. So instead of being 8 pixels and not uniform for the entire corners, now it's uniform throughout. And one other cool thing that we can see is like if we do an overlay, we can show really quickly just kind of like what's being changed over here, and you can just have a visual inspection of what's going on. So compare changes is one of those ways that you can do that. It takes advantage of the version history. It also takes advantage of autosaves. So I can go see here and see all the different autosaves that come up in here. One thing that we suggest is using branches, using named versions so that this history becomes a lot clearer for whoever is looking at it. And by doing that, you make it really easy for the changes to be very stable between every time that you look at it. The nice thing about compare changes is no matter what, like if I'm in dev mode, if something's ready for dev, I can see when it's changed. And if something changes after that, I'll see a little badge over here. I'll see when it was changed, and I can see what those new changes are as well. I'm going to hand this off to Anthony because I think he wanted to go into branches and how that name version history. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So a few pieces here. Let's keep talking about just sort of this idea of compare changes, right? Because like what's the ultimate goal here is to sort of when you're getting back into a file, how quickly can you gain the context and understand what has changed or where you need to be working on things? That experience is different between designers and developers too, right? Because a developer is probably having a higher expectation of unknowns when they're going into this or that they're going into changes. But the same thing can also be true for designers. And like, there's a thing that comes from the development side of things, which is like, there's always 2 developers working on a project at minimum, like you and past you. And the same thing is also true for design, I think, right? You could imagine coming back to a file a long time later and still trying to sort of parse and figure out what is going on in that file. So there's a couple of really valuable tools that I would recommend from the design side of things, right? One big one is version history more than anything. Version history is available. As Akbar was showing history on a component level, you have history for your entire file. Some of you are probably very familiar with this, but if you haven't explored this thoroughly, there's quite a bit of things that you can do with this. So the version history is going to show you your entire history back to your file, back to the creation of your file. There's a limit on free plans, but anyone otherwise, you'll have the full history there. At any point in time, if you want to, you can just click back to an earlier version. You're taken to this view only mode where you can, as of earlier this year, you can now copy directly from, you can like go in and actually copy things directly from this view only mode. So if you just need to go back in time and grab something and bring it forward with you, that's a really quick way to go do that. Maybe you left some good notes for yourself or you had a good example. I don't normally recommend deleting things, but sometimes it happens. And so like if you have to go back and find something, you can. The other things that you can do here is like you can save earlier versions. You can go back and rename other versions if you need to, so that you have like points in time and check marks. And you can also leave descriptions on these, right? So when we're talking about like describing what changed, this can be a really effective way. And it goes back to something Akbar said too as well, which is like, none of this is meant to replace real communication with people. And that's a really important part to remember. It's all about elevating that communication, right? So ideally, if you're finding that you don't have a sense of what's going on in a file at all, that might speak to some bigger underlying communication and process changes that need to occur as to how do you regularly get on the same page? What are your rituals for understanding what's been worked on and how regularly it's getting worked on? Are people just running off into the woods working on something for a long time, coming back, and you're having trouble understanding what's going on? Maybe work needs to be shared more regularly or more openly, or maybe at a smaller cadence, right? So it could be an early indicator of some bigger process and communication work that needs to get debugged as a team. So the last piece on compare changes is talking about branches, right? So version history is kind of like looking backwards in time into your file. And branches are kind of like looking forward. I'm going to use that analogy very loosely, but branches offer you the ability to create new branches of your file. If you imagine your file like a trunk of a tree, right? And your branches are like, okay, I want to explore this new idea. I want to explore this other new idea. You can then decide to fold those back in, or you can decide to cut those branches off and you just want to archive those ideas and never actually bring them back into your main file. So you can just quickly create branches. Have good naming conventions for your branches can be really helpful, right? Maybe dates and times or feature names or things like that. If you're just going new one, like we haven't gotten out of the days of like naming our files like new, final, best, final v4, right? So make sure you've got some descriptive information in here. I'm going to say like update to cart flow. I used to do some development work, so I use this kind of like kebab case, lowercase kind of thing, but you could always just write it in full sentences too if you want. And this is going to create that new branch of your file. It's going to look exactly the same at first because you haven't changed anything, right? So, but if we were to go into this branch, you can see I'm in the branch up here. If I come in and I start changing things like, we're just going to go back to kittens and cupcakes because that's what we sell now as a company. And maybe I want to go in and actually change some colors and some things. I'm going to do something fun with selection colors. I'm going to select all of my screens. And over under selection colors, this feature gives you access to change all of the values where that color is applied simultaneously across anything, whether it's like a stroke or a fill and whatnot. So if I come in here and I say, oh yeah, I want to change all of my text link colors very quickly to this bright pink, or I want to change all of these secondary buttons to bright pink and maybe these primary buttons to bright pink. I don't recommend doing this unless you really want to do pink for your colors for everything. But just to give you a strong example here, let's go ahead and now, if I want to, I can say review and merge changes. And you're going to see some similarities between this view and the one that Akbar was showing a second ago because it's using some of the same underlying technology to do this. But where I can go in and I can do those comparisons, I can do side-by-side comparisons, I can do overlay comparison if I'm checking something that's very nuanced, like white space or pixel pushing or something like that. I can go in and check those things. I can also get a list of what was changed down below, right? So this can really help with getting to that work. Now, again, you may not need this level of granularity. You may just need sort of like a higher level understanding. And so you can actually add in, when you're doing your version histories, you can add in those descriptions too as well. And from here, you can request reviews. You can decide to merge the branches or not merge the branches. We have lots of content on branching, so I'll probably pause there on that. But that's another great way to just sort of get a sense of where you are in the file. I did see one question about like, how do I publish different versions of libraries? And often the first attempt at that is to try and like make a branch and publish that branch. And I just want to say you cannot do that today. So if you need to publish a beta version of your library or publish some new components, you could cherry pick those components individually and publish them and mark them as beta components. You could make a new library and later move those components over and still retain your connections to your instances. So there are other ways to do it, but you can't publish a branch just yet. So just something to call out there.
Awesome. Sweet. Cool. I'm gonna pop over to Mal. I've got like 5 more different ones that I want to answer, so we're gonna be popping around a lot. I'm gonna pop over to Mal to talk about just collaboration in general in FigJam. I think a lot of times developers and PMs who may not be as used to, and any other stakeholders too, who may not be as used to using a design tool like Figma, get a little intimidated in Figma. And so far we've talked about everything going on in Figma, but there's also FigJam, which can be really, really helpful for doing that collaboration in something that's a little bit more familiar to everybody, this whiteboarding tool. So I wanted to see if you could take us through a couple of ways that we can do that collaboration in FigJam, and maybe even like some, whether it's prioritization stuff or like team planning, or how you would do that to make sure that everybody's kind of getting involved in here.
Yeah, of course. So I love FigJam. I'm like the first one to talk about it. So but what's really good is that a lot of the collaboration tools in FigJam are the same in Figma. So just really quick tools that you can use to work better together is spotlight mode. So if you are, say, going through a critique or you're working together in a file, you can always spotlight yourself. And what that will do is it will notify everybody in the file to follow you around. And so their screens will be taken over with what I'm seeing. So this is going to help you navigate large canvases really good as well. What you can do is you can just stop that. And at any moment, you can click on somebody's avatar and find where they are at the file. So maybe now I want to follow Lauren around. And as Lauren's moving, I'm seeing everything she is. And wow, she's really taken us far. And she's using cursor chat to communicate. So yeah, perfect example of another way that you can, communicate in here is cursor chat. If you hit backslash on your keyboard, you can say other things, really short phrases usually. If you want to have longer conversations, definitely a comment or a sticky will be very helpful for that. And just like some other really awesome tools we have built into FigJam, we have our collaboration tools up here. So we have a timer, music, and voting. What I really like to use this timer for is just time boxing our meetings, because we can ramble on. I mean, let's just be honest, brainstorms can go down a certain path. And I think time boxing is just really important. So maybe when you're planning a meeting, you can have like, okay, here's a perfect example. In this brainstorm, we're going to use 10 minutes. So we're going to come up here on the clock and put 10 minutes in. Just really quick way to make sure that you're getting the right things accomplished in a meeting. But what's really cool also is that if we're thinking about process, you can use things like tables in FigJam. You can mention your teammates. You can even use face stamps to dedicate next steps or action items that you would like to focus on after this meeting. So, maybe for this one that's, still a work in progress, I'll tag Anthony in here, and you can add any information you would want. We also have Jira and Asana and a bunch of other widget integrations that you can add to your canvas and track those tasks or links at the same time, which will sync up to those apps in the browser as well. And yeah, some other cool things I just wanted to quickly show is that we have new AI features in FigJam as well. And this is going to be really helpful for once taking your brainstorms to the next level and then being able to quickly summarize them or share them out. We have an example here of maybe what we can accomplish in H1. And so what I can do is I can sort these stickies and I can even summarize them. So now you'll start to see that this will really quickly pull out key themes for me. You can imagine if I had hundreds of stickies in this file, how big that would be. So really awesome tools to start being able to move faster and work better together. And yeah, and if at any moment you're looking for a template, you can go into the template picker here, and there's going to be hundreds of templates made for any use case you would want. You can even create your own team templates that are specific to your organization and quickly add them to any file. Yeah. Any other thoughts from the rest of the team?
No, those are great. I'm just getting into the AI ones, and I have kind of just been blown away at how well you can, the organizational ones in particular. Like I ran it, not part of the critique, but afterwards, I was kind of just interested to see like, oh, how is this going to work? And it caught things that I don't even think I caught, just as far as like, like there's that kind of scary moment where you're like, oh, right, that was actually a theme that I didn't even recognize going through it. So
Yeah.
I used it the other day. We were trying to come up with like a team name for something, for like a new little fun like organization we're doing at Figma. And it was really great for just like helping me think of ideas. I was like, okay, I want to do something with this name that has this. And it would spit out a few. And I'm like, I don't like any of these, but I like where this direction's going. So let's spit out a few. It's fun. I feel like it's almost like a partner to like riff with when you don't have another partner around. It's really, really neat. Awesome. There was a question that came in the chat that a little bit ago that I want to make sure I don't lose. And I'm going to go to Anthony. And then I think Akbar had some great resources as well for this. So this was from Shannon of, I think it was back when maybe we were talking about comments. Is there a good process to QA dev work? So it said, I currently take screens and use the comments to the developers about what should be addressed, but then the dev marks it as completed. So that can make it a little bit difficult to kind of go back to later. Any suggestions on processes for QA?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so at Figma, the way that product and engineering teams work together is we have like a highly embedded process for a lot of that stuff, in the sense that you're working really closely with your development team. So there is, to even call it a handoff, I think is a little challenging for us sometimes, because like we'll often just be like, okay, we're kicking off, right? Like now you're going to be in the file with me. We're going to be working through this, because you don't want to, you want to have technical reviews. You want to make sure that feasibility is starting to make its way into the conversation earlier upstream, right? If you're getting to the end of it and you're like, cool, we have the right persona, we have the right use cases, the experience is right, but oh, by the way, none of this is feasible, and we'll never be able to build this on any of our timelines. You have to make sure that those conversations are happening early on. And so getting to that point, that embedded structure can be helpful. And often what that means is maybe even looking at how your processes are run. And maybe it's that the engineers are not, or the developers are not the ones closing out the tickets, but you are, right? Like maybe you're the one who's actually going in and reviewing and saying, hey, there is a final step here where I want to make sure that work was done correctly. And go through it. I would say also, like, this is a very human side of it. So like accounting for some of that time of knowing that there's going to be some back and forth and there's going to need to be more communication is key. But like, if people are saying I've done something and it's not right, that to me is a red flag to say, okay, we need to have a conversation about like why that's not working and what's going to be the best way to solve it. So mine's a very kind of like soft answer. I don't know if maybe you've got some other thoughts there too as well, but I do think that process piece is really key.
Yeah, the only other thing that I wanted to add is there's a great talk from Config by Varun Vichar from Chromatic, and he talks about this idea of using a UI review process, specifically using the Storybook plugin. But it was Hugo just posted the link in the chat, and it's a really informative talk about how you can create and enforce a process that will allow you to bring the truth of the design to the implementation and bring back any changes when there's a change on the code side, so that there's a chance for design to review it. And then also, if something needs to change back in the design, you can make that change, or you can also just kind of have that review where it's like, okay, this isn't quite where we want it to be. What are the constraints? Can we move forward with the original vision? Can we not? What's the reasoning for that? And really just kind of facilitating that conversation using this idea of a UI review process in a format that's also very familiar to what developers go through with version control, and making different commits and having a process for every change that they make, but bringing that process also to design.
Amazing. There was another question too that this was what came in a lot via the social of, when do you as a developer find it most helpful to be involved in the process? I think in my head, I've always been like, they need to be involved in the beginning. But in reality, like we kind of said at the beginning of this, like it depends, because that's not always possible. So would love to hear from you as a developer, when is most helpful to be involved?
Yeah. And again, this depends on the way your team works and the way that your organization is structured. I mean, as a developer who's a bit more design forward, I like to be involved as early as possible to be part of that discussion, to flag technical constraints when I can. But that's not always the reality of the situation. Like you might be in an org where design and development are really far removed, and so developers only come in at a handoff stage. And so in that particular scenario, that's where it's really important. Like maybe you don't want to invite a developer until in again in that particular scenario until there's something for them to do in the file, right? It's kind of silly, but it's something that makes it a little bit easier for developers to provide good input if the file is not going to be changing as they're looking through it, especially if it's coming to build. Outside of Figma, right, like setting up a meeting with your key stakeholders ahead of time, having like a ways of working conversation, having a conversation with your developer to understand like what do they really care about and what do they need to get their job done and what's not as important can help facilitate a lot of that back and forth where maybe something that you felt was crucial for them to be able to get started isn't as crucial as they say, or maybe something that you didn't even consider, like edge cases, is way more crucial to them that you might not have thought about.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the edge cases always got me. That was the time where I would be like, "Oh, you guys know this one way better than I do." Like y'all are thinking about the edge cases because they have like the code bind and everything. So, absolutely. Amazing. Okay, I think we have time for one more, and this was one that came in a lot via social. And I think it's just a really great one for just kind of how we work these days. Where you can see we're all not in the same place. We are all in very different places right now. And I think that's kind of more of the norm now these days. I said at the beginning that I literally have clocks on my wall for all the different time zones we work in. On just our team alone, there's 20 people, and I think there's 8 time zones, like all across the US. Then we've got France, Germany, London, Singapore, Japan, like it's literally global. And people are asking, how do you have effective communication or effective critiques? How do you do anything effectively when you have such vast time zones? So I wanted to go to Anthony for this one because you've managed people in all those time zones and just have been working with this for a while. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, how to work effectively across time zones.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And you sort of set the stage there, which is that we are a team that has done this and have grown from starting mainly just in one region to now being entirely global. So when I joined, we had advocates in Toronto and in San Francisco. And very quickly that moved to including London and Paris and Berlin, and all of the Singapore and Tokyo and all these different locations now. And it was a challenge. It was a challenge to figure out how we were going to be doing this effectively and like what that was going to look like. And we've learned a lot of lessons along the way. So I want to share with you like some of what I feel like we've learned in that process. I think the first thing to do, and this is part of a larger answer around just like establishing you or your team or your company's ways of working and really making sure that you understand that. And one big section of that is communication, right? So I think some early things to establish are like, you need to understand the team's working styles and you need to actually like go in and look at those time zones. Like it sounds so funny to be like, oh yeah, they're like someone's over here in Singapore or someone's over here in Tokyo or something like that. But like figure out exactly what those differences are, figure out exactly what that overlap is. Like it's an exercise in itself to understand when is a better working time. Maybe you have a team that like, yes, their morning hours overlap better, but they actually like working at night more regularly. So maybe you need to discuss when that's going to be. The next big piece I think is to really establish clearly like your synchronous versus your asynchronous communication model. So synchronous being things of like, we're going to be doing this together in real time. We're going to all hop into a FigJam file or into a Figma file. We're going to have some sort of communication tool, whether we're using audio in Figma or we're using Zoom or we're using Slack or Microsoft Teams or Huddle or something like that for real-time communication. Make sure that that's clearly understood, that it's equitable for everyone too. That's a really key piece. Like make sure everyone has equal access to that technology and those tools that they can use. And then the asynchronous piece, I did this with email for a long time. I will not recommend email to anyone as the best way to start communicating these days. There are messaging tools out there. There are free messaging tools. Ideally, if your companies have some kind of messaging tool, that's a great way to use this as well. Figma has integrations also for Slack and Microsoft Teams. So those are actually great ways to get notified about comments and things like that too for asynchronous work. The next piece is just, and I'll get to the critiques piece in a second, but like debug your rituals regularly, right? So whatever rituals you have when it comes to things like critiques or reviews or tech reviews or anything like that, we've started using this word debug them, because it's a really nice way to talk about, like, it's not that something is fundamentally wrong, but it's that these things have to change over time, right? And so just be sure that you're able to go through that, whether it's just you or you have the luxury of working with a big team. Make sure that you're reviewing them. The last piece, and I just want to share a quick visual for this, is understanding the cadence of when you want to actually have these kinds of meetings. So I'm going to see if I can share a screen here. Hopefully y'all can see a big chart on my screen right now. Center that. Great. This is how people often think that, like, the review and critique process goes, right? It's like, we're aligning on the problem. Great. Oh, awesome. We've explored, we've iterated, we've winnowed, we come back down, we've aligned on the solution. We're heading towards launch and everything feels great. And confidence is constantly going up and to the right. And the reality is that, you know, you end up having something that feels a bit more like this, which is that you will have different phases of confidence in the work that you're doing as new voices come in. Ideas that felt really strong to one person, now you've got new perspectives that you're adding in, or you're feeling like maybe ideas are getting diluted or things need to go in a different direction. And so if you were to just wait till, like, enough time had passed to do a review, how do you have any degree of confidence that you've arrived at the right thing at that point? And so the best thing that you can do is that instead of just waiting for some sort of moment, make sure that you are having that consistent cadence of critique, right? And when we talk about time zone differences, like, figure out who it makes sense for to be involved in real-time critiques with different groups. Maybe you want to start small instead. Have a buddy system where one person and another person will do a first pass on that. Be sure to be clear about what it is that you're trying to get feedback on. And then maybe there's a time and a longer cadence ritual where more folks are getting involved at a more regular time. That, yeah, it might be a little bit of a stretch for folks on time zone wise, but if that's going to be a valuable opportunity for folks, then that's something that you're going to want to try and commit to as well. So those are some of the pieces. I could probably go for hours on this piece in particular, but I know we are we're getting close on time here.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, I love I know Mal is the queen of the audio, like just the audio snippets, so much better. And like I love to do little videos because it's so much better than I think sometimes just typing it out. Like things get lost in type. It's better to hear people and see what they're really trying to say. I love that. Okay, amazing. So we are at time. Thank you all to my panelists so much. We've now gotten through our 3 office hours, 1 to go. I'm going to send out a quick poll here just for folks if you want to learn anything more about Figma. We'll shoot that out. And also our queen Vanessa will drop the link, our live stream queen, she will drop the link of for the variables AMA. Resources, best placed is, I think, our YouTube channel. I love that channel. Community, lots of great resources on there, and our events page to find out more about that. So thank you all for staying with us up until the last minutes, and hopefully we will see you next week for our variables live stream. Awesome. Thank you everybody for your questions.
Yeah.
Thanks, all.